Today's discussion is going to be about the rut. Today's date is October 16th. In about 10 days, things are going to change a lot. This is specific to Pennsylvania, where I hunt. Uh, Roughly in 10 days, there'll be a lot of changes that'll be observable. You'll probably see more deer road kills. Probably have more deer flash out in front of you as a result of that. And it's going to be a big difference because what's going to happen is early does are going to come into estrus. I'm sure there's some here and there that already have been, but just small percentage. But you'll start seeing that happen more frequently starting about roughly the 25th of October through peaking in mid-November. And the question is, how do I know this? Well, if you spend enough time in the woods hunting, and I've been since I've been 12, so we're talking like 30 years here, you're gonna observe it. You're going to see when the movement picks up, and when the movement picks up, it's not because of really any other factor other than rutting activity. Does the moon play a big role? From my analysis, from what I understand, from experience, no. The moon has nothing to do with it. A lot of people write about the moon, the stars, and the planets, and if they all align, everyone's going to get a big buck that year or have some success. Wrong. The biggest factor is nature. The deer will breed the same time every year on clockwork. Why? Because the fawns have to be born in the spring at the same time every year to make sure they have a high survival rate. Okay, and we know when spring happens, it's like clockwork. Yeah, some are a little milder, some are a little colder, but nonetheless, if they're born in that range where it meets what they need, we'll have successful survival rates. And nature takes over and does what nature does. Now, people come out with rut predictions every year. You can't do that. You can't do that. What determines how the rut's going to be when you're in a stand during daylight hours is cold weather. Now, over the years, I've seen and I've harvested basically all of my bucks that I've had success with during cold weather. And that's when, if you look at the weather forecast, cold fronts come through and those drastic drops in temperatures. And you'll hear this a lot from it. That's nothing new. Most hunters who take stuff seriously, who pay attention, they'll know it's the cold weather. But when does rutting activity peak? Well, according to the Pennsylvania Game Commission, their biologists and their studies, it's mid-November here in Pennsylvania. They did a 8-year study starting in 1999, and it went through 2006. And what they found was that conception time periods peak in mid-November. And how did they do this? They studied roadkill deer. And pick up doe, and then they look and see what the embryo size was. They know based on the size of the embryo how the date of conception and how long it's been based on the size of the embryo. They go in and study that. They did it for 8 years. That's a pretty long time. To me, it's good science. You measure the embryo, you know how long it takes for a deer to grow, what size they are, and you chart it up, and boom. You know when the peak of the rut is. And they put a nice graphic out on the Pennsylvania Game Commission website. I'll put the link in the info on this video, on the description. I'll put the link in so you can see the specific details and you can see the reading that goes with it. But I made my own little graphic. I hope everyone can see this. And I'll hold it up here for a little bit. You can take a look at it. Study of breeding activity. Breeding dates 1999 to 2000, and down the right side is the percentage bred. Across the bottom is when these doe were bred. And if you can see here, October 22nd to the 28th, okay, the bar goes up to just about 4%. All right, as I said, in about 10 days, you can start seeing more rutting activity. The early does, several become 4 or 5% spread out across the state. That means roughly there's some does here and there, and you'll start to see the bucks get crazy. You'll see scrapes, You'll see rubs. They'll start to chase, and then as soon as they get that smell in the air, they know something's up and it's triggered. The testosterone's high. Their necks are all swollen. By the end of October, if you see a mature buck at the end of October, he's going to be huge. 5-year-old buck, 4-year-old buck, 6-year-old buck. Neck's going to be huge. Dorsal glands are going to start to get dark. He's just a big boy. He's been eating, and he's ready to go. October 26th here. I'm sorry, October 29th and November 4th. The bar jumps up to about 11-12%. That's the amount of does, the percentage of does that are bred during that time period. And it keeps rising. November 5th to the 11th, it goes up to 20%. So if you add it up, 20%, 12%, we're at 32%, and roughly 4%, we're at 36% of the does are bred by November 11th. And then there's a giant spike up to about 23-25% in mid-November. The bulk of the does are bred in mid-November. That's the peak of the rut in Pennsylvania, mid-November. And then it starts to decrease a little bit, November 19th to 25th. Traditionally, it's during bear season in Pennsylvania, and you talk to bear hunters who are out there frequently, you'll see rutting activity similar to the rutting activity that occurred before the peak of the rut, because they're looking for the does that are still out there. A large chunk of the does, you see here, we've got 24%, we've got 20%, that's 44%, and then we got about another 11-12% here, so that's 55%. So the majority of those are bred by the time we get to the 18th of November. Okay, so you're talking roughly 40-45% of those are left. So that's the bucks are looking. They're out running around. A couple bear seasons ago, I saw 2 giant bucks. Unfortunately, one was only a 6 point. He had 2 brow tines and the big forks. But he was about 20 inches, 22 inches. He was huge in terms of width of the antlers. And he was a big deer. He's an older deer. And he was in the mountains up north central PA. This big deer, he came by scraping and rubbing. He was just angry. And he's like, where are the does? Where are the does? And that's what I'm thinking when I see this activity, right? Like they're thinking, where are the does? And their testosterone's still high. And then you get into this year, rifle season in Pennsylvania, gun season starts the 26th of November. And you got about 10% of the does being bred in that time period. So, we have an early rifle season start. And I've seen rutting activity during gun season, going back to when I was a kid, depending on when the start date is. We have, some years it's later. Some years it was starting like December 1st. This year it's 4 or 5 days before that. And, you'll get the tail end of the rut, and it can be really good. And, we have gun season coming in. And depending on where you're hunting and the pressure and stuff, you could still see some rutting activity similar to what you saw at the end of October, early November. And then you see a drop off less than 5% December 3rd to the 9th. Okay? And then a little bit after that, you'll start seeing those doe fawns who've reached a certain weight. I think it's like 90 pounds, 80 pounds. Once they reach a certain weight, they'll come into estrus later on. And that's why you see some of these young does in the spring have a single fawn that might be born late, like in June, because they were after the peak. They were bred after the peak of rut, so they're a month later. Well, most does are mid-May to the 20-something of May. You've got some of these are mid-June to the 20-something of June, and that's where you see the smaller deer coming into hunting season the following year, the smaller fawns. You're like, wow, that fawn's really little. That's because that fawn was born late, typically to a fawn doe that previous rutting season. So this is my rut, not prediction, but this is what I'm telling you is going to happen based on the science. Study this chart, know this chart, plan your dates. I've got probably 24 dates in November that I'm planning to hunt. I've shot most of my bucks in November. The earliest buck I've ever shot was October 26th. I've shot a couple and had some success. A lot of activity on Halloween. That's one of my favorite days. And then pretty much between Halloween and that peak, between Halloween and Veterans Day is when I've had my most success. And you can see that chart still rising. They're still going after those deer, and then some people call it the lockdown period. But if you get into the thickets, you're going to have to spend the whole time there, or you're going to blow it out. You'll have to spend a whole day. Go in the morning, lock yourself in, have a lot of sleep the night before, and get ready, because you can get activity in those thickets at any point in time, because that's where the bucks are corralling the does and doing their rutting activities. So I'm excited. You probably can tell I get fired up about this. This is like the early weeks of spring gobbler in Pennsylvania. The first week of spring gobbler is like the peak of the rut of spring gobbler hunting in Pennsylvania. Well, this is the peak, obviously, for deer, and I get the same feeling, sensation. If you're a guy that likes to hunt, man, I tell you what, the next 10 days it starts humming. And by the time we get to mid-November, between the end of October and mid-November, that's the time, baby. So get out there, get hunting, make sure you're shooting your bow, get your equipment ready. Now's a good time, it's warmer, take somebody young hunting, introduce them to the wild. And we need more hunters. We need people to carry on a tradition, because once we're gone, our legacy are the people who we've taught and trained up to continue this tradition and keep animals wild and healthy, because we're the conservationists. Number one conservationists in the world are the hunters, because we put our money and we put our effort and we care. Good luck, take care, good hunting.